Hello everyone, I'm Eleanor and I'm one of the trainers at Healthy Dialogues. Welcome to the recording of an Introduction to Conflict Resolution, a workshop. This workshop has been produced by Healthy Dialogues in collaboration with Thrive London and funded by the Mayor of London. Conflict is a natural part of human interaction, and learning how to effectively manage and resolve conflicts is a crucial skill in both personal and professional relationships. Whether it's disagreements with colleagues, conflicts within teams, or tensions in personal relationships, the ability to navigate and resolve conflicts constructively is essential for fostering positive communication and collaboration. The workshop is a recorded version of the live event, and there is a BSL interpreter present throughout the workshop. As it is a recording, you will not be able to access the live Mentimeter, but the facilitator will read out some of the comments that were submitted by attendees on the live workshop. Today's training has been designed and delivered by the team at Healthy Dialogues. Healthy Dialogues is an independent behaviour change advisory and delivery consultancy, and a leading provider of health and wellbeing training for frontline professionals. The team of health psychologists and public health practitioners at Healthy Dialogues have been delivering evidence-based behaviour change training across England since 2013. If you would like to find out more, please check out our website or send us an email. Okay, so it's fabulous to have everyone here. Really looking forward to this afternoon. So we'll get started. Okay, so what will we be covering today? So we'll be looking at understanding conflict, the common causes of conflict and conflict styles, communication skills, and personal coping strategies. So to start us off, I want to ask, what do we think conflict is? What do we think conflict is, and when might it arise? So you can use the Mentimeter to put in your answers. It'd be great to hear from people what they think conflict is. And when we've had a few suggestions, Helen will be able to come in and read some of the Mentimeter suggestions. So what do we think conflict is? When do we think it might arise?
So we have had a number of examples coming through, and I'll list some of those out. So we have disagreeing, seeing things differently, when colleagues clash of opinions, disagreement that can't be easily resolved, strong opposing views with no compromise, power, unable to come to an understanding.
Yeah, so some great suggestions there, and I think you're all pretty much near what conflict is. So according to the Collins English Dictionary, conflict is described as a serious disagreement and argument. If two people or groups are in conflict, they have had a serious disagreement and have not yet reached agreement. So I quite like that. That's quite a succinct way of describing conflict. So there's lots of different types of conflict. We're going to be having a look at these 4 different types throughout the workshop. So they're described as intrapersonal conflict. So an example of this is conflict experienced by a single person when their goals, values, and roles diverge. So this might be a conflict within us. So we might think, oh, I'd like to cut down on the amount of chocolate that I want to eat, but at the same time, I love eating chocolate and it's really tasty and it makes me feel good. So that might be a conflict within ourselves. So then we've got interpersonal conflict. So this is conflict that's due to differences in goals, values, and styles between 2 or more people who are required to interact. So again, very similar to the intrapersonal, but instead of being within yourself, this is related to between yourself and others. So then we've got intra-group conflict. So this is conflict within a group or a team where members conflict over the goals or procedures. So this might typically come out during a work setting, when maybe you've got two teams within the same department that have conflicting goals or procedures, and they might have to work out how to work through those. And then we've got intergroup conflict. So this can be conflict between groups inside and outside of an organisation who might disagree on various issues. So, for example, you might have your organisation has a particular goal, and when you have to interact with people from a different organisation, they might have some conflicting goals or ways of doing things. So this might particularly play out in terms of if you've got multidisciplinary teams. You might have different people with different roles that are in conflict with one another. Okay, so now we're going to move on to looking at conflict in the workplace. So what are some reasons for conflict in the workplace? If you can enter it into the Mentimeter, I'd really love to hear what you think are some reasons for conflict in the workplace. What do we think? So what do we think are some reasons for conflict in the workplace?
So we have some ideas coming through and some thoughts. Miscommunication, tension, different working styles, stress or burnout, a lack of communication, different working styles, performance issues, workload, lots of different reasons for conflict in the workplace.
Yeah, so there can be lots and lots of reasons, as Helen said, and some really great suggestions there of some ideas of what some different reasons might be. So I'm going to have a look now at where these different reasons for conflict might fit in, the sort of categories that we typically see in the workplace. So we have leadership conflicts, which is one of the most common types of conflict in the workplace. So this tends to occur when there's disagreement about how to lead a team. So this may involve some disputes about the leader's authority, decision making, power, or strategy. Then we've got work style conflicts. So this tends to occur when employees or managers have different expectations about how other employees should work. So, for example, conflicts might arise from cultural differences, personality differences, and other views around how to do the job. So I don't know if anyone's ever experienced where they are doing their job in a certain way, and then you have a colleague that comes in and says, no, you should be doing it this way because that's how they do it. And it might not be that either way is right. It's just two different ways of doing something. But how do you manage that conflict between the two of you? You can also have creative conflicts. So this can arise when employees have differing ideas about how tasks should be carried out. It may be because they have differing expertise. So they might have sort of creative differences. So you might be designing a presentation together, and one of you thinks that the presentation should include lots of slides and lots of information on the slides, but another colleague thinks actually it should be mainly images on the slides and you should keep it to a minimum with the number of slides. So how do you resolve those creative differences between you? Then we've got task-based conflict. So when different people or teams are allocated different tasks, so conflicts can arise from various sources, such as different expectations or goals, conflicting work schedules, and insufficient communication. So an example of this might be you've been given a presentation to design and your colleague has to deliver it. But because you're both really busy, you haven't been able to meet and discuss how you'd like the presentation to look. And maybe you haven't really communicated with each other what the goals of the presentation are. So when it comes to them delivering it, they might find that actually it hasn't been done to how they would like it, but you were following the brief. So there might be some conflict that arises there. And then lastly, we have personality conflict. So this can occur when two or more people have different personalities, which leads to differences in communication styles and may involve power and status differences. So this can occur between employees and their managers, different co-workers at all levels. We might have different ways of going about things. Someone might quite like to meet a conflict head on, whereas someone else might like to have a bit of a break from a conflict and go away and have a think about it. So how do we marry up those different ways of communicating? So now we're going to have a little look at some conflict models. So there's lots of different conflict models that have been developed. We're going to have a look at just one of them today. We could do a whole workshop on all the different conflict models, but we've picked just one of them today for you to have a look at in a little bit more depth. So has anyone heard of the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument? That's a bit of a mouthful. Give me a thumbs up on the reactions if you've heard of this before. Has anyone not heard of it? Is this new to some people? Yeah, so I'm getting a few different reactions, mixed reactions. Okay. Yeah, so this was developed by Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilmann, and this model identifies 5 conflict resolution styles. So we've got competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. So this instrument helps individuals to understand their preferred style and offers insights into when to use the different styles. So we're going to look at it in a little bit more depth and what those 5 different resolution styles are. And it might help whilst we're going through this for you to think yourselves about what sort of style do I tend to use, and maybe what situations do I tend to use them in. So the different styles then. So the conflict styles refer to the characteristic approaches or behaviours that people tend to use when faced with conflict. So different people have different preferences for handling conflicts, and understanding these styles can be beneficial for effective conflict resolution. So first of all, we've got competing. So this style involves pursuing one's own concerns at the expense of others. It can be seen as a win-lose approach, where one party seeks to assert their needs, opinions, or goals without much regard for the interests of others. So that might seem on the surface like it's not a great way of resolving conflict, but there are definitely some instances where that might be a more useful way, and we probably all know someone that does like to use that as their conflict style. And I think this is also true for, you know, different industries, different professions. Some of these different styles might suit them better than others. So next we've got collaborating. So collaboration is a win-win approach that involves seeking solutions that satisfy the concerns of all parties involved. So it requires a high level of assertiveness and cooperation, with an emphasis on open communication, problem solving, and mutual understanding. So like I was saying earlier, in terms of multidisciplinary teams, this might be an approach that is used quite a lot, because you want to reach a consensus when you're discussing something. So that will involve having an open communication style where you work on a solution together. Then we've got compromising. So in the compromising style, people are willing to give up some of their concerns in order to meet the concerns of others. So it involves a sort of middle ground approach where both parties make concessions to achieve a mutually acceptable solution. So an instance of this might be at work. You and your colleague want to do your presentation differently, and actually you think, well, I'm not super wedded to the way that I want to do it. I'm quite happy to compromise, and maybe we have some slides that have images and some slides that have text, and then your colleague agrees with you and they're happy to do it in that way. Then we've got avoiding. So avoidance is a conflict style that's categorized by a low level of assertiveness and cooperation. So individuals using this style may sidestep or ignore conflicts, hoping that they will resolve on their own, or avoiding situations that may lead to conflict altogether. So I know there's definitely been some situations where I've thought, oh, I'm not really sure if I want to rock the boat in this setting, so I'm going to sort of try and avoid that conflict. Then we've got accommodating. So accommodation involves prioritizing the concerns of others over one's own. It is cooperative, but it's not a very assertive approach. So individuals might sacrifice their own needs and desires to maintain harmony and to avoid conflict. So we tend to find that maybe the accommodating and the avoiding go a bit hand in hand. So in order to try and avoid conflict, we might take a more accommodating approach. So what do we think of all of these styles? Do these resonate with people? Give me a thumbs up or a different reaction. What are our thoughts on these? Great, fab. Yeah, getting loads and loads of thumbs up. So these are styles that we can recognize either in ourselves or in other people. So it is important to note that people do use different conflict styles in different situations, and that no single style is appropriate at all times. So the effectiveness of a particular conflict style definitely depends on the nature of the conflict, the goals of the people involved, and the context in which the conflict arises. So a key aspect of conflict resolution is helping people to recognize their default conflict styles, understand when to adapt their styles, and then to develop a versatile set of skills for handling conflict in various situations. So that's what we're going to hopefully be doing in this workshop today, is looking at some of those skills that we can use to adapt our conflict styles and help us to manage and resolve conflict. So we're going to move on now then to looking at conflict resolution techniques and strategies. So these approaches are used to address and resolve conflicts in a constructive and positive manner. So these techniques aim to promote understanding, collaboration, and mutually beneficial solutions. So we'll be going through them in this workshop. So we'll be looking at active listening skills, we'll be looking at regulating our emotions, using negotiation strategies, increasing our assertiveness, and using de-escalation techniques. And then at the end of the workshop, we've got an opportunity, or nearest the end, we've got an opportunity to put all of those things into practice in a scenario so that we can come together as a group and think of some ways that we might reduce some conflict. Okay, so we're going to have a look now at active listening skills. So have people heard of any of these active listening skills before? You can give me a thumbs up or another reaction. Are these quite familiar to people? Yeah, great. I'm getting lots of thumbs up and a few love hearts. So obviously these are skills that people like then. So active listening skills are a set of techniques and behaviours that individuals use to fully engage with and understand the speaker during a conversation. So these skills are really vital in conflict resolution as they enable us to understand each other's perspectives. They help build trust between us, and they help to reduce misunderstandings by allowing each person to clarify information and manage emotions. So we're going to have a little look at each of these. So first of all, we've got open discovery questions. So I'm not sure if people have heard of these before, open questions versus closed questions. So open discovery questions are Questions that encourage detailed responses and an exploration of a topic, allowing for deeper understanding, and they allow us to uncover information or insights that we might not have known before. So this is in contrast to closed questions that usually require shorter answers, so a yes or a no. So we might say, how are you feeling today, rather than are you feeling okay today? So that would be an example of an open discovery question. Next, we've got reflections. So reflections are responses in communication that mirror or restate what the person said. So it might be what they said or their emotions, and it demonstrates our understanding and our empathy. So if someone said to us, I'm finding it really difficult at work to manage my workload, we might say, I can hear that you're finding it really difficult to manage your workload. And we might say that as part of a conversation that we have with someone, just to make them feel like they're seen and they're heard, and that we're listening to all of their concerns. Next, we've got showing empathy. So this involves really listening to another person's perspective, acknowledging their emotions with phrases like, I understand how you feel, and offering support without judgment to demonstrate genuine care and understanding for their experiences. Additionally, we can validate their feelings by saying things like, it sounds like you're going through a tough time. And this really helps us to create a supportive environment where individuals can feel heard and understood. Then we've got eye contact, so making sure that we're giving each other eye contact. That helps to show that we are paying attention, we're focusing in on what someone says. I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced it when you're talking to someone and they just look like they're bored, or they're looking elsewhere, or they're looking at their phone, and it really doesn't make you feel very heard and understood. So just making sure, I'm not suggesting that we give direct eye contact the entire time, but maybe just checking in with each other to make sure that you are focusing and listening to what the other person says. We've also got non-verbal cues. So these can be gestures, facial expressions, body language, and other non-verbal signals that can convey meaning and emotions in communication. So we might nod to show our agreement. We might maintain eye contact to demonstrate attentiveness, or on the flip side, we might cross our arms to signal defensiveness or disagreement. So I've definitely had that in conversations when people have done that, and I've thought, oh no, I think we might start to disagree on something, or they're not happy with what I've said. Then we've got summarizing. So another skill that we can use when we're having a conversation with someone. So this is where we condense and recap the main points or key information that someone said. Again, this is a good way of demonstrating that you've listened to everything that someone has said, and also to clarify your understanding. So if someone comes to you and they're talking to you about how they feel, and it's kind of a long conversation, you might want to use a summary right at the end, just to check in with them that you have understood and heard everything that they covered. Then we've got withholding judgment and opinion. So this is a really important one, trying to keep away our advice or our opinions to ourselves until we kind of come on to that bit. When we're really just listening to people, we want to really get into their shoes and not bring our own opinions, advice and judgment into it. Then avoiding interruptions. So there's kind of nothing worse than when you're trying to have a serious conversation with someone and someone's phone goes off, or someone bustles into your office and wants to talk to you about something else. So as much as you can, I know it's hard when you do work in busy places, trying to find a quieter place where you won't be interrupted if you are going to have a conversation that might be about conflict. And then lastly, we've got affirmations. So affirmations in the workplace are positive statements or acknowledgements that validate a person's contribution, skills, or efforts. So, for example, you did an excellent job on that project, or your innovative ideas are valued and appreciated. And I think the most important thing about affirmations is that they need to be genuine. So they need to be something that we really do think about someone, because it's it's very possible that people will pick up when you don't mean it, because it can sometimes come across as a bit patronizing. I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced when someone said, "Oh, well done," and you think, "Oh, I'm not sure that was met with that was meant particularly genuine." So if you don't feel that you can give a genuine affirmation, it's probably best to avoid it. But it's really encouraging when you are pleased with how someone's done, or you really appreciate that someone's done something or said something. Definitely make sure to use affirmations. Okay, so now we're going to have a little look at an example of an active listening conversation. So Helen and I are going to read the two roles here, so Alex and Taylor. And as I'm reading through, I want you to have a think about what active listening techniques do you think we used in this conversation, because we're going to share in the Mentimeter after. So just be having a think about it whilst we're going through. So Helen's going to read Alex and I'm going to read Taylor.
Taylor, I've noticed that there's been a breakdown in communication regarding our project tasks. I feel like some team members are not pulling their weight, and it's impacting the project's progress.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I just want to make sure I understand the specific challenges you're facing. Can you provide examples or share more details about instances where communication broke down or team members didn't contribute as expected?
I've just noticed that Hayley seems to be taking on a lot of the project management side of things, whilst also acting as the intermediary between the client and ourselves, whilst Mike only seems to be working on the presentation. I don't think it is fair to the team to have such an unbalanced workload.
I can see why this situation is concerning. It's frustrating when one team member seems to be taking on the majority of the workload. Let's work together to address this.
I think if we can address these communication gaps and redistribute tasks more effectively, we can get back on track.
I hear you suggesting a solution that involves addressing communication gaps and redistributing tasks. Can you share any ideas you have in mind?
I think sitting down as a team and looking at the project planning document would help.
That sounds like a great plan. Let's get a date in the diary now to go through it with the team. Okay, so thank you, Helen, for being my co-role player there. So in the Mentimeter, I'd like people to put in what active listening techniques do you think we used in that role play? Have you got any thoughts about that role play? Did you like it? Did you not? Any of the techniques that you think we used?
So there's some comments coming through on the Menti. We have summarizing, paraphrasing, affirmations. Someone commented in the chat that said, when I have raised workload concerns like this example, my manager was dismissive. Is this because I did not communicate effectively, or perhaps they were not listening?
Yeah, so it's tricky to sort of comment on that without knowing a little bit more context. Maybe once we've gone through a few more of the examples, we can have another look. I think as well, active listening often takes two people to really kind of have that successful two-way conversation. So it might be that you were using the active listening skills, but maybe your manager or the person you were communicating with just wasn't picking up on those things. And that definitely can be very frustrating. Okay, so any more active listening techniques do we think were used?
So there was reflections, paraphrasing, positive language,
Mm,
repeating back the query,
yeah.
validating concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Validation comes up quite a few times.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's a really important one actually. That makes such a difference when we're trying to share our challenges with a colleague or a manager. Just feeling validated, that they're taking what we're saying seriously, that they're hearing what we're saying, they're not trying to dismiss us. So yeah, definitely great suggestions. We've got summarizing, got open discovery questions, affirmations, validation. And yeah, it was really the whole feel of the conversation was about coming to a collaborative decision together. Okay, so now we're going to look at another of the skills and techniques. So this is emotional regulation. So have people heard about emotional regulation before? I know in other workshops I've done, sometimes this is not always something that people have heard of, but I'm getting lots of thumbs up, which is great. People have heard of it. Okay, so regulating our emotions during a conflict is a crucial skill that can help us to maintain our composure, think clearly, and engage in constructive communication. So there are a few ways that we can do this. So first of all, taking a couple of deep breaths. So deep breathing can help to calm our nervous system and reduce those physiological impacts of stress. So a good way to do this is to inhale deeply, hold for a few seconds, and exhale slowly. So when we're feeling a little bit panicked about a conflict, or maybe we're feeling a bit angry, a bit frustrated, feeling quite stressed by it, just taking some deep breaths. I know it sounds very simple, but it really does have a physiological impact on our bodies. It just helps calm our nervous system down. And when we've calmed down, that allows us to think a bit more clearly. And then before we react to someone, so if we're already kind of in a conflict state, it might be worth taking a couple of minutes just to pause and reflect and asking yourself these questions. So you can ask, if I was addressing this person about the same situation, does the core of the argument hold any truth? So am I just taking what this person says in a different way because of who they are? If they were coming to me about something, if I was to raise the same issue, would it be that we'd have the same thoughts? Or am I just responding to this because historically maybe I haven't gotten all that well with this person, or maybe we've had conflict before? Is there anything that they're saying that in their core argument that rings true? And then again, you can ask, if I remove the emotional delivery, is the message true? So sometimes it can be really hard when someone comes at us in a very emotional state. Maybe they're very frustrated, they're very angry, and they shout their message to us, and that can be really hard. But thinking to ourselves, okay, well, if they came to me in a calm and relaxed state, is what they were saying, would that ring true for me? Or is this actually quite a lot about the delivery? You can also establish some boundaries to protect yourself emotionally. So if you feel that the conversation is getting too heated, then it's okay to ask the other person to have a break from the conversation and to return to it when you've both had a chance to think about it and calm down. So as I said earlier, with different people's conflict styles, some people prefer to really tackle things head on and they want to address an issue there and then other people, that can feel quite overwhelming for them, and actually that would be too much. So making sure that you compromise between the two, and if you do need to have a break and come back to the conflict, negotiating with each other, when are we going to come back to the conflict? Are we going to give it an hour? Are we going to give it a day? Because that allows both of you to sort of cope in the way that you need to. So the person that is that likes to tackle things head on, it gives them a chance to think, okay, I will get this resolved, and this is when I will get it resolved, either in an hour or or in a day or whatever, and it gives the person that's feeling a bit overwhelmed just time to calm themselves down and have a think about how they want to respond. And then if you are still feeling emotional after a conflict, it's okay to take a few minutes to distract yourself. So either take a short walk, engage in a different task, or do a short mindfulness exercise. So all really great ways of using emotional regulation. Has anyone used any of those techniques before? You can give me a thumbs up or a different reaction. Yeah, a few people. I know I've certainly had a few situations at work when I've had to think, okay, I'm just going to take a few deep breaths here because this has got a bit upsetting or a bit frustrating. Okay, so now we're going to look at assertiveness. So what do you think being assertive looks like? So you can put your answers into the Mentimeter. What do we think being assertive looks like? I know sometimes this can look quite differently to people.
So some of the comments coming through: holding a strong stance, communicating boundaries clearly, calm, clear, consistent, being firm in your stance but not aggressive, making sure you're heard, using clear language, keeping boundaries, and boundaries are coming up a few times. Holding your values, consistency, having courage to express your views.
Yeah, definitely. Some really great responses there. And I heard sort of being assertive without being aggressive. So that's also a really important one, because I think sometimes people can get the two mixed up. So yeah, we're going to look at some ways to help with being assertive. So assertiveness skills are communication and behavioural skills that allow people to express their thoughts, feelings, needs and boundaries in a clear, honest and respectful manner. So assertiveness involves standing up for yourself whilst respecting the rights and opinions of others. So we've got a workplace example here. So imagine you made a mistake at work and the next day your manager called you out about it in front of everyone in a meeting. So an assertive response to this might be that you wait until after the meeting and then you take them aside privately and politely, tell them that you didn't appreciate the spotlight. You can also tell them that you prefer it if they raise concerns with you privately rather in front of the group. So again, you're not coming across aggressively, you're waiting until after the meeting because you don't want to create a conflict right there and then in the meeting, and people don't tend to react very well as well if they're in front of people. So doing it after the meeting, but also still standing up for yourself and putting in those boundaries that actually you don't really want them to go about it in the same way next time. So you can also use I statements to express your thoughts and feelings without sounding accusatory. So for example, you might say I feel instead of you always, to take ownership of your emotions. So that is a slightly different way of thinking about it. Instead of saying you're always late with all of your work, you might say, for example, I feel like it impacts on my ability to do my work when you're quite late to the deadline, because it doesn't give me enough time to prepare my own work and my own contributions. Next, we've got boundaries. So like we've already spoken a little bit about, clearly define and communicate your personal boundaries. So be assertive in saying no when necessary and establish limits that reflect your values and comfort level. So an example of this in the workplace might be at work, setting a boundary could involve establishing clear communication regarding personal space and interruptions during focused work time. For instance, Sarah, a project manager, kindly informs her colleagues that she prefers uninterrupted work periods from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. to concentrate on critical tasks. She emphasises the importance of minimising non-urgent interruptions during this time to maximise her productivity. By respectfully communicating her boundaries, Sarah fosters a more understanding and supportive work environment while also effectively managing her time and workload. We've also got rehearse conversations and visualize. So you might visualize yourself being assertive at work. This might involve you imagining scenarios where you confidently express your opinions, set boundaries, and assertively communicate your needs. So, for example, you might visualize yourself calmly but firmly speaking up during a meeting to ensure your ideas are heard and considered. You might picture yourself respectfully declining additional tasks when your plate is already full, articulating your reasons with confidence and clarity. So, by visualizing these scenarios, you mentally prepare yourself to assert your needs and boundaries in real life situations, fostering greater self-assurance and effectiveness in the workplace. So linking it as well to, I don't know if anyone watches any sports, if you watch rugby, football, any of your favorite sports, a lot of players always say in interviews that before any big match or anything like that, they visualize themselves doing, I don't know, the rugby move or the football move. You can tell I'm not all that great at rugby and football, but carrying out the move successfully. And they rehearse that several times over and over again before an important match, so that the brain kind of already remembers when they're in that scenario that it's done this before and it can do it again. So yeah, apologies again for my awful sports analogies, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. So we've also got celebrating being assertive at work. So this involves acknowledging and recognizing moments where you effectively asserted yourself in a professional manner. So I think this is really important because it's sometimes really hard to be assertive at work, and actually recognizing that we were able to do it is really important. So an example might be after successfully navigating a challenging conversation with a colleague about workload distribution, we take a moment to reflect on our assertiveness and the positive outcome it achieved. We might share our experience with a trusted co-worker or supervisor, highlighting the assertive communication techniques you employed and the benefits it brought to the team. Additionally, you might treat yourself with a small reward or moment of self-care as a way to acknowledge and reinforce your assertive behaviour. And then this then helps to encourage us to do this again in the future. It gives us confidence to do it in the future. So remember that becoming more assertive is a gradual process. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and continue to refine your assertiveness skills as you encounter different situations. And if you consistently practice being assertive, you'll improve your confidence and you'll get more and more effective at how to do it. And it should hopefully in time reduce some of the worry about being assertive. Okay, so we're going to have a little look now at negotiation. So another key skill in terms of conflict resolution. And we've put together a 4-step plan that you might want to think about in terms of negotiation. So when you're maybe preparing to negotiate with maybe a colleague, a co-worker, another team member, another team, another organisation, you might want to think about these things. So firstly, you might want to identify the root cause of a conflict. So this is really important because conflicts can arise from misunderstandings, assumptions, or different perspectives rather than from incompatible goals or interests. So by identifying the root cause, you can avoid wasting time and energy on irrelevant or superficial issues and focus in instead on the core problem. And you might actually find that through trying to identify a root cause, you find that actually you are all on the same page and there isn't really a conflict. It's just there was a misunderstanding some way along the way. It's also important to separate the people from the conflict. So direct your attention on the problem at hand and stay away from personal attacks. You know, you're sort of all coming at it from the same side in that you want to come to a resolution together. It's not about this person was horrible or this person said this or this person can't do their work. Try and keep it as objective as possible. Secondly, think about how you want to respond in the situation. So earlier in the workshop, we talked about different conflict styles. We mentioned competing, avoiding, accommodating, compromising, and collaborating. So each of those approaches has their advantages and disadvantages, and you need to consider the relationship, the importance, and the urgency of the issue when you're thinking about how do I want to respond, what conflict style do I want to choose. And then thirdly, focus on finding common gains. So try and find solutions that satisfy both people. So this might mean that you need to explore many options and try and generate new solutions. And then lastly, it's important to follow up on any plans you make. So it might be helpful after the discussion to write notes summarising what was said and agreed, and then send them to the other person to confirm. And then agree with the other person how you'll both follow up on any agreements made and how and when that will be done. Okay, and then the last type of skills and techniques I want to cover before we have a go at putting them all into practice is escalation and de-escalation. So managing conflict effectively involves both escalation and de-escalation strategies, depending on the situation and the desired outcome. So when we're thinking about escalation techniques, one of them is to establish consequences. So clearly communicate the potential consequences if the conflict remains unresolved. This may include escalation to higher levels of authority, involvement of HR or other formal measures. You might want to involve someone higher up. So if a conflict persists, consider involving a higher authority or supervisor. This can actually be really helpful in terms of providing additional perspectives and resources to address an issue. Lastly, you can seek professional mediators. So bringing in an external mediator if you feel that a neutral person is needed. And then on the flip side, we've got de-escalation techniques. So like we spoke about earlier, either using I or we language. So we want to try and not use you versus me. We're in this together to find a shared goal and a shared way of resolving the conflict. Identifying areas of common ground. So identify areas of agreement or common ground, focusing on shared interests can provide the foundation for finding solutions. So what is it that you've got in common? Is there a common thing that you're both interested in terms of resolving this conflict? So I'm just thinking in terms of the multidisciplinary team example that I gave earlier, if there's a patient or a client at the heart of that, you know, finding that really what matters is the client or the patient, and finding a shared way forward for them is the most important. And then we've got acknowledge and validate feelings. So acknowledge the other person's feelings, even if you don't agree with their perspective. Like we said earlier, validating really helps to create a sense of understanding. And then focus on the future. So shift the focus from past grievances to future solutions. Discuss how to move forward in a positive and collaborative manner. Okay, so I've just talked at you for a long time. So now I would like everyone to get involved. So we've got a scenario here, and I'm going to read out both of the perspectives, and I want you to put on the Mentimeter what skills and techniques that we've learned about today could we use to try and resolve this conflict that's going on between Sarah and Alex. So Sarah's perspective is that Sarah believes that the team should divide responsibilities based on individual expertise, with each member handling tasks aligned with their strengths. She feels that this approach will result in a more efficient and successful project. Alex's perspective. Alex, on the other hand, thinks that responsibility should be distributed evenly among team members to ensure a balanced workload and promote skill development. Alex values collaboration and wants everyone to contribute equally to the project. So in the Mentimeter, I want you to put any ideas that you've got, any of the skills or techniques that we've learnt about today. How might we resolve this conflict between Sarah and Alex?
So some thoughts coming through as people reflect on Sarah's perspective and Alex's perspective. Options to have a meeting, use negotiation strategies, validation of the other person's plan, consulting the team and asking for their view, and trying to reach a compromise with skills and workload. Have a conversation in a private, calm place about each other's beliefs and use active listening to each other. Preventing escalation by taking out opinion and using negotiation. Involving the team and seeing everyone's preferences. Validation of each perspective. Trying and looking at each of the perspectives.
Yeah.
And discussing the options with the team to allow for a unified agreement.
Yeah, definitely. Really fab suggestions there. You know, listening to each other's perspectives, taking opinions out of it, involving the team, because they might be able to act as kind of a third party to provide a different perspective on it. Because actually, maybe it's that the team would prefer to just do it in a certain way, and therefore the root cause of the conflict is really the root cause, because if everyone prefers to do it a certain way, maybe everyone prefers to do it Sarah's way, and actually Alex is sort of not too bothered and he's quite happy to accommodate. Yeah, so some really great suggestions there, and do feel free to keep reflecting on that and adding to the Mentimeter as we go along. Okay, so just before we finish today then, I just want to talk a little bit about group conflict facilitation. So group conflict facilitation refers to the process of managing or guiding conflicts within a group setting in a constructive manner. So conflict within groups is a natural occurrence and can arise due to differences in opinions, goals, values, and personalities among group members. So facilitation involves helping group members navigate through conflicts in a way that promotes understanding, promotes communication, and ultimately leads to a resolution. So you might have a situation at work where you're asked to facilitate a group conflict resolution meeting, or you might be involved in one. So we put together a few steps that you might want to think about if you are involved in a group conflict resolution instead of just individual one-to-one resolution. So step one, we say familiarise yourself with the details of the conflict. So understand the perspectives of each party involved and gather relevant information. Step two, begin the session by setting ground rules for the discussion. Emphasize the importance of respectful communication, active listening, and a commitment to finding a resolution for everyone. Step three, you might ensure that the physical environment is conducive to open communication, so arranging the seating in a neutral way, and consider the use of a neutral meeting space if needed. So I don't know if anyone's been in a situation where you've come into a room and there's one of you sitting on one side of the table and about 5 other people sitting on the other side. So again, that probably wouldn't be an environment that's conducive to open communication. That might feel a bit threatening. Step four, allow each party to express their perspective without interruption. Step five, clarify the specific issues that need resolution. So break down any complex problems into manageable components to address each concern individually. So instead of coming at a big problem at once, we might think, okay, what are the different bits of this that we can solve individually? Step 6, create a structure for the meeting. So explain to both parties or all the parties involved that you're going to give an overview of the issues, and each party will be allowed to share their side and then respond to any material covered by the other side. Then the group will be encouraged to come together to find a mutual solution and agree how it is to be implemented and followed up. So it's really important at this stage that you safely manage all the emotions in the room and suggest taking breaks if you feel that it's becoming too heated. And you might want to suggest some of the emotional regulation techniques we talked about. Step 7, clearly document any agreements reached during the session. So summarise key points and ensure that all parties are in agreement with the proposed resolutions. And then step 8, which is really important, to develop a follow-up plan to monitor the implementation of agreed upon solutions. So establish a timeline for check-ins to make sure that the conflict resolution is effective in the long term. So it might be that you put together a plan and it works for a while, but actually we need to make sure that in the long term it is still working for all parties involved. So just remember that the role of the facilitator in this instance is to guide the process, to ensure fairness and promote constructive communication. It's essential to remain neutral and actively listen and help the others in the group navigate towards a resolution collaboratively. So you might even want to talk about any of the other techniques that we've talked about today. People in the group might find some of those helpful. Okay, so we've covered a lot in this session. We're going to have some time at the end just to have possibly a couple of questions. But before we do, and before I talk about the next steps, we would really, really appreciate if you could fill out our quick evaluation survey. You can either use the QR code or you can use the link. This just helps to give us feedback so that we can continuously improve our workshops and our offerings for the future. And it's just really helpful learning for all of us. So we'd really appreciate you taking just a little bit of time to fill that out. And then we've just got a minute or so. So have we got any questions from anyone at the moment? On the Mentimeter, there is an opportunity to ask some questions if there's any that we can answer now very quickly.
There was a question earlier on whilst people are just putting together some questions. When you were discussing the emotional regulation strategy, there was a lack of clarity around imagining asking about the person's core argument, and wonder whether you could just summarise that.
Yeah, so that was section in terms of asking yourself the question. So thinking about, is the person's core argument something that I would agree with? So I'm just trying to think of an example in the workplace. Might be someone comes to you and they say, oh, the systems that we're using, the IT systems that we're using are not working effectively. Everyone on the team is struggling with them, but the way in which they come to you is that they shout these things, they say it very aggressively, maybe very accusatory, maybe in the past you've sort of butted heads before. So it's actually thinking about, okay, well, what is their core argument in this? Their core argument is that maybe the IT systems need reviewing. So is that something that we can now talk about together, removing kind of all the other emotions, removing everything else? Can I suggest to the person, okay, I hear that this is really frustrating for you. I can hear that it's frustrating for the team. Would you be open to sitting down, the two of us, and finding a way to improve these IT systems together? So that might be an example of removing that kind of all the history maybe that you have with that person or their emotions, and just focusing in on the core argument. I hope that was a helpful example. Okay, so we haven't got any more time for any more questions, but if there are questions, we will endeavour to answer them and we'll put them in the follow-up email, so any ones that we haven't been able to get to. And then just at the end, I've got up on the screen here the workshop dates for the other workshops that we're running. So today's workshop was recorded and that recording will be available I think it should be around late March. We are also running this workshop again next week. So the conflict resolution workshop that you can see there, that is running. This is the exact same workshop. So you don't need to attend that one if you've seen this one, unless of course you want to hear all the tips again. We are also running our resilience workshop 2 and 3 again, and we will have a BSL interpreter at both of those, and they will be recorded. So if you're interested in joining those, they are different, those two as well. So we're doing a series of 3 resilience workshops. We've done the first one, and these are the second and third ones. So do book yourselves onto those if you're interested. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again today. I hope that that's been helpful for people. I hope that you've learned something, some bits that you can take away and have a go at. And remember to celebrate and acknowledge any successes that you do have. That's really important. But otherwise, have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And it was absolutely wonderful to have you all on the call today. And thank you so much for contributing to the Mentimeter. I'm really looking forward to having another look at those. And I will include the word clouds and things from that in the copy of the slides that you get after this workshop. So you will be able to see what other people wrote on there. But otherwise, have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And thank you to Samaya, our BSL interpreter, for being on the call today. And thank you to Helen for managing the Mentimeter today and being my co-role player for that example. But otherwise, have a fabulous rest of your afternoon, everyone. Absolutely fantastic to see you all. And I wish you well.